Welcome back to the Rural Opportunities Podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Leon and Juanita from Métis Crossing. Métis Crossing is the first major Métis cultural interpretive center in Alberta. It is a premier destination for Alberta cultural interpretation, education, gatherings, and business development. Located on a beautiful piece of land, this rural Alberta destination is a must-see. If you're anything like me, you have a lot of learning and unlearning to do in regards to Indigenous people and culture in Canada, and I hope this conversation is a step in the right direction. As Juanita says in the episode, Métis Crossing is for everyone. Whether you are Métis, Indigenous, or any other background, there's lots to learn and discover at Métis Crossing. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Rural Opportunities Podcast. I'm here with Juanita and Leon from Métis Crossing, Alberta, and we're going to talk about Indigenous Tourism Alberta today. So, Juanita, I'll get you to start introducing yourself and just a bit of your background, your nation, and how you got involved in Métis Crossing.
Thank you. My name is Juanita Marois, and I'm the Executive Director with Metis Crossing. We are located in Smoky Lake County, so a bit northeast of the city of Edmonton. And I've been with Métis Crossing for a few years. I was here at the very beginning when we started the concept in 2003, 4, 5. Then I left for a while and came back in 2017. And together we've been working to create Canada's first major Métis destination. It's very exciting. Our past leadership wanted a place to celebrate and share who we are as Métis people. And in 2001, we purchased the land and we've been working on that. And finally in 2019, we were able to complete the building behind us and we have become a year-round destination. And we really have fun sharing and celebrating our Métis culture in ways that no one else can. We have 512 acres, we're attached to the river, and we do all sorts of engaging, inspiring experiences.
Wow, that's amazing. And Leon, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
My name is Leon Hunter, and I'm the manager here at Métis Crossing. And I've been involved for the past 6.5 years, and I've seen the site transform and change, most notably with the construction of the new cultural gathering center and the lodge that's imminently being constructed right now, scheduled for completion in August 2021.
Okay, that's exciting. How did you guys get interested in tourism in the first place?
So I actually have a background in tourism. I started my BA in Recreation Administration at the U of A, then went on to complete a master's degree in tourism through the U of A as well, the University of Alberta. I was very fortunate. At that time, I was sponsored to go to northern Thailand, and I had a really unique opportunity to live with hill tribes in the north part of Thailand, looking at responsible Indigenous tourism development. Mm-hmm. And it was quite amazing when I came back to Canada and I was able to work with my own nation. So I'm a very proud citizen of the Metis Nation of Alberta, and to work with our leadership and our citizens and our elders and our knowledge holders and our youth to plan and develop something that's really special, because it doesn't exist anywhere else in Canada, and it's a place where I can really bring almost every part of myself into what I'm doing, which is pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
My background comes from wanting to always share with others.
That's awesome. And Leon, how about yourself?
I think I was a tourist before I started working in tourism. I always found, like, I would always celebrate these milestones in my life with great trips, or what I try to make great trips. And I think the big trip I had before I started coming to Métis Crossing really made me want to work in something that would be able to share that feeling that I got when I went traveling and was able to experience a new place and a new culture. And so, when I returned, the path led me to Métis Crossing, and I've been able to, I hope anyways, able to, help people experience something that's truly Canadian, truly Alberta, which is the Métis story that we share here at Métis Crossing, and then also just the natural beauty of the area and their Métis culture as well. Mm-hmm. So.
For people who aren't familiar with the Métis Nation, can you guys give a little bit of a background?
Yes, so the Métis people, we have been around for a very long time in Canada, and there's a bit of a joke that people ask when the first Métis person was born in Canada, and it's 9 months and 1 day after the first fur trader arrived on the East Coast. And that's kind of true, but not really. The Métis Nation of people developed over time, so it wasn't until the third generations of those mixed ancestries have come together. So it's not just the children of the first European First Nation union, it's there's children's children that came together. And growing across what is now Canada, growing with the fur trade, those people that were of mixed ancestry didn't completely fit into a First Nation community. They didn't completely fit into a European community. So they created their own. And over hundreds of years, we created our own language. We have our own flag. We fought battles together. We developed a culture. We developed our own arts, our own food. And in the 1700s, we were really together as a nation of people. And so in 1982, we were recognized as one of Canada's 3 distinct Aboriginal peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And the neat thing is we are distinct. We have cousins that are both Inuit and Métis, but we're distinct from all of that, and we're very proud to share who we are as a nation of people.
That's cool. Do you have anything to add, Leon?
I think Juanita summed it up pretty good there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I'm learning and from looking at the Indigenous tourism website is that each nation has distinct culture and unique things about it. And yeah, I didn't realize all of the differences that encompass Indigenous people in Alberta. Can you talk a bit about why it's so important to make that distinction and to celebrate each one of their backgrounds?
Yes, and I think it's very common, and think of it from an international perspective, if it even surprises you a bit. So for international visitors coming to Canada, they think, oh, I'm going to go to Canada and I'm going to see an Indigenous person and I'm going to know all there is to know. Right. But Indigenous people are like intimately linked to their land base. They're intimately linked to the places where they grew up and learned. So each nation has very different arts, very different food, very different transportation based on where they come from and how they interconnect with the land and the animals and the rivers, the waters, everything in that place. So it is really important to understand the diversity. It's like you don't understand Canada by going to Newfoundland. You don't understand Canada by going to Vancouver because they're very different people within these 2 places. And that's kind of like it is for Indigenous peoples. We have our own lifeways, our own languages, our own arts and crafts. And it's just so intimately tied to where we are and where we come from. So you'll see a very different art, for example, on the West Coast than you do on the prairies.
Right, for sure. So what are some culturally distinct things about the Métis Nation?
Oh, you got good questions. I think our dance and our music, we have fiddle music that combines steps from our First Nations cousins as well as from the Scottish and the French influence.
Okay.
The fiddling, the jigging that comes along with that, they're very unique and different, and they have a very strong spirit about them that really display the Métis people. Our beadwork, our weaving have become very culturally significant to us. And I have to admit, I have people on my team at Metis Crossing that are way better at communicating these differences than I am, but you just have to come and visit them. We have a knowledge holder, Lily Rose, and a traditional arts person, Crystal Letty, who do amazing work, and they're very strong in sharing those cultural distinctions.
That's amazing. So take us into Metis Crossing. If we go there, what are we going to experience?
Leon.
Thank you. First of all, most people arrive at Metis Crossing with a car ride out of Edmonton. We're about an hour and a half northeast of Edmonton. It's through the prairies, so you'll see a lot of fields. But when you get to Metis Crossing, you'll know because the road dips down into the river valley, and you can see over, as you cross the bridge, you can see all the buildings and part of Metis Crossing there. So as you arrive, you're going to pull up and you're going to see the brand new Cultural Gathering Center. It's an architectural marvel that's been designed with all kinds of sustainable architectural features incorporated into it. So you're going to come in there and you're going to go check out that building. Now, Right now, we're very fortunate that we are sharing and hosting a display called Hidden in Plain Sight that was developed by the Canadian Archives in conjunction with the Métis National Council. So it's a beautiful exhibit that talks about the unique identity of the Métis and some of their cultural and historical highlights. So after that, if it depends, and after that, it really depends on what time of year that you come and visit us, because our programming, it changes with the season. So right now, there's snow on the ground. And so if you were to come and visit us, we would probably take you onto one of our Tales from the Trapline experiences, where you're gonna get together with Lily Rose and venture into the river valley and learn about what life was like as a fur trapper. So there's different survival techniques that are involved there, that different way of life that is a lot more closer to living off of the land. Being able to read the nuances of the environment. So like, how do you spot where animals were living? What kind of animals are that? What kind of traps should I set to catch those animals? And then also what you would do with those animals. And there's a historical perspective, how the fur trade gave rise to the Métis people, but then there's also a contemporary focus. So how did that historical perspective impact what the Métis people are, how they live today? And that's as you know, the more time you spend in Metis Crossing, the more you'll realize that that's a very, very broad and diverse group of people. Everything from people that live on settlement, in one of the settlements close to us, Buffalo Lake or Kikino, to the Métis people that live in the city of Edmonton and throughout society. So it's a very diverse group, and we attempt to tell that story from the national perspective, focused on the Métis Nation of Alberta's cultural identity.
So Juanita, as you said in the beginning, Metis Crossing is Canada's first major Métis gathering center. So is there almost two different aspects of programming, where specifically for Métis gathering with each other, and then for tourists and people wanting to learn more about it?
Good question. So Metis Crossing really works to share our Métis story with all people. And we want to be a tool for reconciliation, so a safe place where people can ask questions. So everyone is welcome at Metis Crossing. We don't care if you're orange or green or purple or red or white. It doesn't matter. Everyone's welcome to come and learn about who we are. There absolutely are times when there will be a more Métis specific, like a community specific programming. But those are sometimes the best opportunities for people who are not Métis to learn about who we are. So National Indigenous Peoples Day, we have a lot of our own Métis citizens coming, and they're performing, and Métis people love microphones. So there's all kinds of contests on the stage, and they're performing, but that is really who we are. So we welcome non-Métis people to come and experience those times as well. Having said that, we are also a very important place for the Métis Nation of Alberta. So our own government has children's services and youth programs and things like that. And they come and they use our facilities quite a bit. Okay. So we're doing training programs right now for future foster parents that want to know how to be better foster parents to Métis children. We're doing things with our own youth where they come out, and many Métis youth, as Leon said, grow up in Calgary or Edmonton, so a little bit disconnected from their land, but they come to Metis Crossing and they can learn some of the traditional activities and explore actually what it also means to be a contemporary Métis person, because Metis Crossing very much focuses on our past, our present, and our future, not just where we used to be. We're not sharing the story of a dead culture. We're very much alive here today and intend to be there for generations to come.
For sure. And you brought up reconciliation, which I wanted to ask about. How does Indigenous tourism help foster reconciliation in Canada, and do you think it does?
I think it plays a huge role in many ways. So one is just the opportunity to learn. I think many people honestly don't know. They don't know about Métis history. They don't know about First Nations history. And certainly what has been taught in our schools to date is incomplete. it's not necessarily wrong, but very incomplete. The Métis perspective, the First Nations perspective, hasn't been fully shared there. So places like Metis Crossing, and there are more places like this in the province for other nations, we really provide that safe place to ask difficult questions. So for the general public, it allows you to come and ask those questions. But even beyond that, Metis Crossing is developing corporate training. So for different corporations, whether they're the oil and gas industry or the police sector or health services, we're developing programs for them so that they can better understand who we are as a nation of people as well. And then that kind of deeper dive, not from a tourism perspective, but from a professional perspective, also really helps in that reconciliation conversation.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of businesses that also want to spend money with Indigenous groups now, and that's part of reconciliation too. So we provide a place where if you're going to host a workshop or a conference or something like that, Metis Crossing is not only an Indigenous place where you can spend your money, but you're going to get top rate service and really great an appreciation and a respect for the Indigenous people that built this.
Right. Yeah, that's super important. Is Metis Crossing on reserve?
No. Go ahead, Leon.
So Métis people actually don't necessarily live on reserves. There's no like Métis specific reserve land in Canada. The Métis have only in Alberta what is called Métis settlements, and that's so there's 8 Métis settlements that exist within Alberta, and Métis Crossing does not exist on that settlement land either. It's its own entity.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. I'm learning so much already. What has been your favorite thing that you've heard from guests? I'll go, Leon, you can go first.
Sure, thanks for that question. I think it speaks to a few different things, and we've touched on them a little bit before. One of the things is when you have that Métis person that maybe grew up in the middle of the city and didn't necessarily have that really strong connection to their culture. When they come and visit Metis Crossing and they have an opportunity to connect with that culture that maybe they didn't have a chance to at earlier times in their lives, and they just say, wow, I didn't realize that I was a part of such an amazing nation. And so there's that connection that's developed. And the same thing goes for non-Indigenous visitors as well, being able to connect in an intimate and meaningful way with one of the 3 Indigenous groups of people to Canada, provides that opportunity for deeper understanding, mutual respect of cultures and people, and maybe is taking down some of those barriers that they thought were there before, as far as being able to understand something about a culture that maybe they hadn't been exposed to. So it's really about a place for sharing and connection, and when we can share that and instill that with our visitors, we feel like we've done our job.
That's awesome. And Juanita?
I think I'm going to echo similar comments. Some of the great things I've heard is like, wow, I had no idea. Like, I had no idea that Métis people have done this. I had no idea that Métis people contributed this much to the building of Canada. We did so much work opening up, particularly the West out here. And people just really didn't understand. And I think it's really cool. Both Leon and I had traveled extensively internationally prior to coming to Metis Crossing, and knowing that we can supply that same kind of experience to Canadians and to people from abroad here. Like, people will travel thousands of miles to come and learn about the Indigenous people here in Canada, and we can provide that opportunity to wow them. And that just breaks stereotypes. It changes what people see in the media, and it's just really a place of pride for us.
Absolutely. So you guys have mentioned international guests a couple times. Before COVID, let's say, do you guys have a lot of international guests, or were they more from in Canada and Alberta?
We're developing, so we absolutely have had international guests, but as the Indigenous tourism sector, and I know you're going to talk to Mackenzie about that in the near future, but as that's growing, has become more of a focus for us, absolutely. Indigenous tourism is growing, well, pre-COVID, it was outpacing the growth of regular tourism by 10 times. So we're very excited to welcome those international visitors. And a neat thing for Métis people is when I talked about who we are, we know that we come from Europeans. So there's a lot of French, Scottish, English heritage in us. So there's
Right.
really neat connections between Europeans and the Métis people. So that is one of the main markets that we want to go after, are those European people that want to reconnect to those early fur traders that their ancestors had come to this great nation in the past.
Right.
And we're really looking forward to that. And certainly we want to serve our local people, and people are welcome to come visit us. But Metis Crossing also has an underlying goal, which is to become financially self-sustainable, which is a little bit different than many other cultural centers. So we know that the people who will probably spend more money here are international tourists. So they're absolutely a market that we really want to focus on in the future.
For sure. And now that COVID has happened, how has that affected Metis Crossing?
Well, it's significant, and I think that it's significant for every tourism business throughout the world, and also outside of the tourism sector as well. The most notable things that I can tell you about right now is with increased restrictions, we have where there's closures, right? We were closed when the first lockdown happened. We're in a period right now where interpretive centers aren't open as well. So there's the limited ability to be open, and then also when restrictions do ease, there's obviously visitor and employee safety is paramount. So there's extra precautions being taken when people do come through the doors. We ask that there's the regular screening procedures that happen, like questioning, taking people's temperatures, a little bit of contact tracing, sanitization is obviously throughout the site, everywhere you go. So just those added measures that are becoming more and more commonplace across society these days to help prevent the spread. But being a tourism organization, welcoming people from further afield, we try to go that extra step to really make sure that there is no spread happening here, because this is, let's face it, people come here generally to enjoy their leisure time, and we want to ensure that that's being done in a safe and responsible way. So that's paramount with all of the decisions we make right now in welcoming guests.
Absolutely, for sure. So you guys have talked about your favorite things that you've heard from guests. What is the biggest misconception that you find people have when they come to Metis Crossing?
There's two things I wanted to touch on with this. The first misconception, I think, is a more broader one, and that is about the cultural nuances and the identity of who the Métis people are. So when they come and visit Metis Crossing, they really get a deeper sense of understanding about the Métis culture and Métis people and history. I think the other misconception is about Metis Crossing itself. In 2020, we completed the Cultural Gathering Center. That's drastically and dramatically changed the way that we operate our site. And so when people come and visit us now that this facility is in place and operating, it's changed. Our return visitors that had been here before, they're like, wow, I did not realize that this had existed if they hadn't heard about it, or they're excited and they want to come and see how it's changed. And so, we've been able to elevate our offering, everything from culinary experiences, which are phenomenal, to increased interpretive demonstrations. The exhibits that are there, like the Hiding in Plain Sight, is able to operate more of an installation type of scenario, and then the cultural demonstrations are on another level as well, as we develop more and more. So I think those are the two misconceptions that I would say are out there. So I invite people to come and visit Metis Crossing and change their conception.
Absolutely. Juanita, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I would echo Leon's comments, but I think there are a couple other ones that really stand out for me. And one is that Louis Riel was a trader to Canada, and he was hung as a traitor. I think that's a misconception that I love to blow out of the water. He was one of the fathers of Confederation, helped to author the BNA Act, really. Another one, Métis people pay taxes. We don't have any tax breaks. Another one, we don't live on reserves. I think we need to have like a Jeopardy game of Métis that we can build into our programming, because there are all kinds of them. And I think the biggest one is that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit are distinct, and we all have different relationships with the federal government and the provincial government.
Yeah, I saw that on the ITA website that changed the misconception that all Indigenous experiences are the same, which is almost mind-blowing that that's the misconception out there. I want to ask you guys a little bit about Indigenous Tourism Alberta itself. What does it mean to you guys to have an Indigenous tourism organization that represents you specifically?
I think it's really important, partly because as operators, we're nose down, we're getting things done, we're planning for the next day, we're putting events together, we're building our facilities. ITA, and Indigenous Tourism Alberta, and ITAC, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, are able to take that step back and look at the industry and what are the trends, what do visitors want to see, how do we get the marketing word out there to both local, national, and international tourists. So they're really able to step back out of the flurry of the ground that we're in and kind of represent us as an industry. And ITA is young, but they've been doing a really good job of that, and ITAC as well. They open our eyes, my eyes, to opportunity to say that, hey, this is the market out there. This is what the trends are telling us. So they're doing that research for us, which makes it easier for us as operators then to implement marketing strategies and plans and to develop experiences that not only reflect who we are, but also address the desires of the visitors coming to Canada.
Right. And has it helped bring connections between other Indigenous tourism operators as well?
Very much. The summits, the Indigenous tourism summits and the conferences, it allows us to sit down and to, again, separate from the day-to-day and sit down with other operators and talk to them about what we're doing and how can we connect and how can we build together, and, you know, training programs we're trying to build together that we can train people together. So absolutely it helps us as operators. And Alberta is so big that unless you have a place to come together at something like a conference or a summit, you don't get to connect with the other groups.
I want to ask if there's like a favorite Métis story, historical or current, that you guys would want to share with us. I kind of sprung that one on you.
Yeah. I don't have one right now, Leon.
I got one, and I heard this one because of one of our elders who comes and visits us, and he always comes. He's always 2 days early before the Métis festivals, like Indigenous Peoples Days or Voyager Days, and he's always leaves 2 days late. So he's always here and he's sharing great stories. And he says to me one day, we're getting ready to set up a display in the Sinclair House, and I said to him, I'm like, Emil, do you think that you're gonna jig this weekend when the fiddle band plays? And he's like, Leon, there's one way that you make a Métis man go crazy. I'm like, what's that? He's like, you nail the shoes to the floor and you play the Red River Jig and you try to watch them stand still. So whenever we have, the community coming together and the music starts playing and you really get to, those people like Emil Blyan and all those community people come together, you really get a sense of what that Métis culture community is like, and it comes together and it's alive and it's vibrant. And I really have to just welcome and encourage people to come and visit us during those days, because you'll get to see that essence of that spirit, and how alive it is, and you get a deeper understanding of where it came from. It's from a historical perspective, and then also the unique identity that is represented there as well. So that's my favorite story, I think, is about the Red River Jig and trying to sit still during it, because it's really, really hard to do.
Yeah, I like that. So are some of those events going to be going ahead in 2021 with COVID precautions, obviously?
We have, I think what we try to do is we try to do everything that we can until somebody says that we can't. So, so if we can host people on June 21st on Indigenous Peoples Day, absolutely we're going to do that, unless there's a restriction, that an AHS guideline that prevents us from doing that. Of course, we're going to follow all AHS guidelines to a T, and in some respects probably exceed them. But yeah, we're very excited and look forward to sharing the new center with as many people as possible, because really it was completed in like January 2020, And then the lockdown came March 2016. So we haven't really gotten the chance to share at the center as vastly as we wanted to. And then another thing that we're really, really looking forward to is in August, the Métis Nation of Alberta's annual General Assembly, which we really want to have that first great big community event, welcome the entire Métis Nation of Alberta to the gathering center, to their gathering center, and practice that tradition of setting direction for the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is what the Assembly does. So we'll try to do as much as we can given the circumstances.
For sure. Yeah, it'll be cool when we can all do stuff fully again. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add?
I see there's a question here about what's the biggest takeaway. And I wanted to talk about the takeaway because we really feel like, again, maybe we talked about it a little bit before, but there's three things I think that we like people to leave with when they come and visit us at Métis Crossing. And one is, that connection with nature. Two is the connection with culture, but then also time to connect with their family and friends that they came with. And being a rural location, I think that it almost provides for that greater opportunity to have an undistracted time that's spent with your family and friends. A lot of times, cell phones don't actually even work out here. So that distraction is completely removed, and we're in the woods, and it creates that experience or that possibility for you to have that deeper, uninterrupted connection with your family and friends, and then also the world around you, and then learn about this amazing culture of the Métis people in Alberta as well. So those are the three big things I think that we try to give that opportunity for every visitor to come connect with and leave with as well.
For sure. One thing I was curious about as well is like when there's Indigenous gift shops and you can buy artwork and say like a sweater with Indigenous drawings on it. What are the thoughts when like white people wear it? Like if you're not Métis or if you're not Indigenous, what are the thoughts on wearing that or purchasing that stuff?
That's a really great question. And the question, it really boils down to appreciation or appropriation of culture. And I think what we try to do at Métis Crossing, and that's another thing that will be growing, is our gift shop, and we have a very strong focus on authentic Indigenous art. So you're not going to find any moccasins made in China in our gift shop. You're not going to find probably not even any dream catchers, because that's more of a First Nations tradition than a Métis tradition. But when we're selling things and we're selling authentic artists and authentic Métis artists and the work done by Métis people, it's because we want to share it.
Right.
So we don't have a problem if you have a cup that has a traditional Métis design on it, as long as it was done by a Métis artist and it represents and respects that Métis artist. Because in fact, what you're doing is supporting our economic reality.
Yes.
Everybody needs to work. Everybody needs to make money. So if you're doing that in a respectful way that appreciates and honors the work of the Indigenous artist, then we welcome that. There are particular Métis or First Nations symbols that ought not to be worn by all people. Some of them are meant to be very spiritual gifts for the Métis people. In some ways, that's often a sash, and a sash there are sashes that you can purchase, but there are others that are given as a very important gift, as a sign of an accomplishment or collaboration. For First Nations, it's often a feather or something like that really represents their culture. So not everything is meant to be shared by all, but I think you can be confident that if you're buying something in our gift shop anyway, it's something that we want to share. We want you to celebrate who we are.
Can you talk a little bit more about the appropriation? What does that mean?
How long do you have? An appropriation of culture is when you take something and you try to make it your own. So if you were to come and learn how to do a beading pattern and then try to sell it as authentic Indigenous art elsewhere, there's nothing wrong with you learning our arts and cultures and doing it for yourself, but when then you try to financially benefit from it or take it and say that it's your own, that's where you're going to run into problems. Or if you wear something in a matter of disrespect that, it's not a costume. It's not something that you wear on Halloween. It's something we're proud of, and,
Right.
kind of.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. And my last question is, if you could tell people one thing about your operation and Indigenous tourism, what would it be?
I think I would say that we rival any experience that you're going to have in Mexico or Australia or in South America. We have a unique Indigenous culture, and we have experiences and opportunities to engage and experience that culture that you might think you need to travel around the world to do, but you don't need to. You just need to float down North Saskatchewan and find us.
Right. That's awesome. That's a good selling point right there, especially now in COVID when it's a local thing that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Leon, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't think I could have said it better myself. I think that was great.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Just come on and visit us.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to get out there now that I've learned all this about it.
Sorry, there's just one more piece I want to add, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And it goes back to, you asked if we were on reserve land, and I expressed that no, we're not. And I just want to tell people why we are where we are, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So Metis Crossing is not located on reserve, but we actually are in a very historic place. So we exist along the North Saskatchewan River, and the location where we are actually has archaeological digs that show it's where First Nations from the north and the south came together for thousands of years to do trading. Because of that, because those First Nations were already there trading, the Hudson's Bay Company and the Methodist missionaries created a trading fort, as well as a Methodist missionary site there. And then as they were trying to build relationships with the First Nations, they weren't being extremely successful. So they actually went back to the Red River Colony in Manitoba, which was one of the largest Métis communities in what is now Canada. It wasn't yet Canada, and invited those Métis families to come further west and settle. So the entire region that Metis Crossing exists in is actually the result of a Métis community that settled there in the 1860s to the 1900s. And you can, as you come down the rivers, as you come over the hill that Leon described, you'll immediately know why they stopped here, why this was the place where people came together to trade, to come together, to share stories for hundreds of thousands of years, because it is amazing. And that is why we are where we are. And it's why when people come to Metis Crossing, they almost immediately feel the connection to that place. It's not just somewhere where you go, it's a connection to a place and a spirit of the land that people really enjoy and feel when they come to Metis Crossing.
That's a good background to that. I thank you for adding that in. While we're still on here, I thought of another question. So Métis people were left out of the reserves. So does that mean they were also, like, how does the Indian Act, I think there's a Métis Act, like how does that all play together?
So the Métis people are not part of the Indian Act, and at this point there is no Métis Act. But actually, Megan, this is really cool, because the Métis Nation of Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan signed self-government agreements with the federal government in 2019. So we are right now in the process in Alberta of developing a modern day treaty. Not by litigation, not by being in the courts. This is nation to nation negotiation, which is amazing. This is history in the making, and it's so exciting to be a part of it, because we are developing a modern day treaty. We are defining our own relationship with the country of Canada. We are a nation within a nation, and it's really cool to be a part of that. So we define what the Métis Act will look like for us.
Right. Oh, that's cool. And like, what exactly does that change for Métis people? Like, how do you see that benefiting?
Well, a part of it is to be defined as we go along this process. But I think the biggest piece of it is a recognition. For many years, we were left out of the Indian Act. We didn't have reserve land. We were given scrip, which was supposed to extinguish our Indigenous land rights, but on an individual basis as opposed to a nation basis. So I think the biggest thing is a recognition that we are one of the distinct nations here in Canada. But what that will do for us is help us to define our own future. So instead of Instead of a government that doesn't really understand this group of people defining what a housing policy will be, the Métis Nation will define what a housing policy will be for low-income people within the nation. Instead of defining how our children are going to be dealt with in children's services, it'll be a nation-to-nation negotiation in terms of how are Métis children best handled in a system. How do we, basically we want to bring the Métis people up to an equivalent level with mainstream Canadians.
Mm. That's a big piece of reconciliation too. Yeah, for sure. Is there anywhere where people can find like Indigenous news, and like if they want to support, like where are the best places to go?
I think with the Métis Nation, albertamétis.com is the Métis Nation website. So that is a great place to go for information. And it also will link you out if you're interested in that constitution, in that self-government process. There are really amazing links in there. And it's history in the making. Mm-hmm. But there are also some great Indigenous media outlets. So APTN, Windspeaker is a great newspaper. And Leon, what's the new Indigenous radio station that just started in Edmonton?
It's the Raven. Everybody's raving about the Raven, and that's a division of Windspeaker Radio. There's actually a really good Métis host on the morning show, I believe. His name is Bill LeBlanc, or as he's known on the scene there as Relic. And so there's, and that's a great way to connect also with Indigenous culture, getting in touch with those media sources. And again, I think that the biggest thing I think that about a lot of these type of things, Indigenous media, Métis cultural centers, Indigenous cultural centers, is they're not just for Indigenous people. They're for everybody. And that's what Indigenous tourism is really all about, is welcoming all different kinds of people to their sites to celebrate and share those stories. Because it creates like Juanita mentioned earlier, it creates an economically sustainable way to keep those cultural traditions alive and celebrated. And so that's really, I think, fundamentally a true power of Indigenous tourism, is that it provides that outlet for ongoing cultural celebration, exploration, and sharing.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing all of this. I think it's important for non-Indigenous people in Canada to learn about this and to get more information and to experience what your cultures have to offer. And that is really how we get to reconciliation in the end. So I appreciate you guys sharing everything with me today, and I'll link your information into the bio, and I hope our listeners now come to Metis Crossing and get to experience it for themselves.
Thanks so much, Megan. It's been great talking with you this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Welcome to the Rural Opportunities Podcast, where we talk about all things rural. This podcast is put on by the Camrose Regional Exhibition. We are an agriculture society, and we are community builders. We have a long, rich history of rural community and agriculture involvement. CRE believes in the power of rural communities and that they are vital to the prosperity of our province and beyond. On this podcast, we talk about rural opportunities and challenges and have conversations with the movers and shakers of rural. Thank you for joining us. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow us on whatever podcast channel you're listening to.